I will not make age an issue of this campaign. I am not going to exploit, for political purposes, my opponent's youth and inexperience.
A date which will live in infamy.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
I know words. I had the best words.
You have stolen my dreams, my childhood.
First off, no.
Hello. Welcome. Welcome to the inaugural edition, the very first show of Reason to Refrain. Glad you're here. Glad to have you. Ty, how you doing?
Doing quite well. It's a nice Christmas time feeling, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
having a
it's
good
great.
Christmas
It's
time?
freezing.
Yeah, I know. It was 80 degrees a couple days ago, and now we have Christmassy weather,
Yeah.
or Cleveland weather at least.
Yeah, there you go. Well, we figured that one of the regular segments on our show is going to be in the news since our last show. And so to begin our show today, we are going to, as usual, begin the show with in the news since our last show. And so, in the news since our last show, we landed on the moon! Yes! Also in the news since our last show, Sean Hopper, Bill Gibson, Johnny Colla, Mario Cipollone,
Yeah, I would go with that.
Chris Hayes, Ron Stallings, John Pierce, Steph Burns, in the news since our last show, and of course Huey Lewis.
Of course.
Also, in the news since our last show, smallpox, polio, measles, mumps, whooping cough, and a slew of other diseases responsible for the death of literally millions of children throughout history were cured by the remarkable invention of vaccines. And then a group of mostly young married women selling lavender essential oils were like, meh. Finally, in the news since our last show, American slavery of Africans ended. Seriously. Like in 1866, slavery, it ended. It's done with. Can we just... Seriously? Okay, moving on from in the news since our last show. Actual more recent news. Got a few things that are going on today. To begin with, Christmas shoppers are continuing to abandon brick and mortar stores, and Joe Biden is reportedly among them. Had you heard about this?
I actually had.
Yeah.
I actually had.
He decided that this year he's going to be buying all of his gifts out of the Montgomery Ward catalog.
I know he said hasn't moved on to the Sears catalog yet, huh?
Correct. Yeah. He needs to get with the times. Get one of those record players out of that catalog and
Yes, yeah.
play it for the kids.
Play 78s.
There you go. Donald Trump continues to insist that the impeachment proceedings are a witch hunt and intends to submit definitive proof that he weighs more than a duck should the trial go to Senate.
I mean, we can't build a bridge out of him, right? So,
Very small rocks. Senate Democrats plan to call John Bolton to testify in Trump's impeachment trial. When pressed for their reasoning, they said that they have questions that they simply mustache him. Okay, that is my favorite joke that you wrote from the top.
okay.
That is the best joke.
well, I mean, you can't hear John Bolton's name without thinking of
Exactly.
which it's like Tom Selleck. And somehow John Bolton's on that list too.
I am perfectly fine with being known as the guy who loves the terrible puns. And so, you have many more to look forward to as we continue. LSU quarterback Joe Burrow won the Heisman Trophy. And during his acceptance speech, he mentioned that his hometown in Ohio was suffering from a food crisis. This is an actual piece of news. This isn't just made up for a pun. This mention of his hometown actually prompted over $350,000 in donations to the local food bank virtually overnight.
Wow.
Really, it's a cool story.
No, it is. It's very generous. Very generous.
A really remarkable story.
Yeah.
In other news, Alabama still isn't in the playoffs, so to sum up both stories, there is much feasting and rejoicing. And OU is in the playoffs.
Yes. Yeah, well, yeah.
You're welcome, Baylor fans everywhere.
Yeah, well, we'll get them next year. Waco shirt.
Boris Johnson was decisively reelected. Now, this is over in Britain. This is actually big news. Boris Johnson is the new prime minister. He has been campaigning ruthlessly on nothing but Brexit. If you remember back a few years ago, the people in Britain voted that Great Britain should leave the EU. They are tired of being tied to the EU. And so Boris Johnson's thing has always been Brexit, 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 only Brexit, hard Brexit. We want to get out of the EU.
Despite that vote, it should be noted it hasn't happened.
Correct.
They actually left the European Union. They
It
just
hasn't
said they're
actually
going to.
happened.
So,
The fact that Boris Johnson won re-election is huge news. And people in America should take note. It's kind of a precursor for what's going to happen with Trump, I think. But it should also be noted that American socialists were surprisingly resonating with the Brexiteers because of the Brexiteers' completely accurate slogan, "Real Brexit has never been tried."
that's true. Going back to William the Conqueror, right?
On to local news. Here in Houston, despite challenger Tony Busby's promise to do all of the things by spending all of the money, Sylvester Turner rolled to re-election in Houston's mayoral race runoff by promising to continue being a lying Democrat. And on the topic of local news, local TV stations are swimming in ad revenue thanks to Michael Bloomberg. And so this is something Ty and I were talking about before cameras were rolling. And we're talking about just political ads in general. And you had some great insights.
Oh, yes. Well, I mean, so Michael Bloomberg's, if you're watching local television, really here in Texas, of course, in any of the Super Tuesday states, Michael Bloomberg has spent close to $100 million already. He's been in the campaign for 4 or 5 hours, right? Yeah, and he spent just millions and millions of dollars on TV ads to let people know he's running for president. He's so late in the game, he has to let people know that, he's actually in the race. And the ads are they're pretty boring. They're pretty bland. It's pretty much, he's not bombastic. He comes on and says, America's full of problems and I'm the guy to fix it, right? I'm going to be good for the middle class and for the poor and I'm going to fix health care and I'm not going to be like Donald Trump. He briefly kind of touches on that and there's a photograph of Trump in there. He's got pictures of people of various ethnicities in various stages of life,
as you have to have as a Democrat.
Various jobs. There's blue collar people, there's office people, there's people working in schools and hospitals and whatnot. And it's all. I get that he's running. I pay attention to the news. I pay attention to ads because my dad worked in advertising for 30 years, so it's something of interest to me. But it's not. These aren't real interesting ads, and most political ads aren't. They're there to reinforce the brand make you say, well, the guy's not spending money. What's wrong? Well, he doesn't have any. We don't see all these Julian Castro ads. Well, he doesn't have money. He's not polling well, and I'm sure he could be reached for comment, but nobody wants. Nobody cares.
Nobody cares about Julian Castro's
right.
comment.
So anyway, it's just they're not. Most political ads don't stand out to me. There's ones that do. There's ones that people talk about in the history classes. They're famous. The girl picking the flower petals off, 1964, and then it's a nuclear explosion because Barry Goldwater was going to nuke us all. Or the famous Ronald Reagan, This Morning Again in America kind of TV ads, or the Willie Horton ad from the 1988 election, Dukakis in the tank, getting that photo up and then sticking it in a TV ad, and then Dukakis coming back with an ad basically saying 1 in 4 vice presidents has had to step up and become president because of assassination or death or whatever. 1 in 4, 1 in 4. This was basically saying, if you vote for George H.W. Bush, you're also voting for Dan Quayle. so they're trying to win an election by running down the vice presidential candidate. Was not a successful strategy in the 1988 election. So, more recently, and we were talking about this earlier, the one that came to mind was in the Republican primary in 2014 for for Senate, Ted Cruz was running against David Dewhurst. David Dewhurst actually was the leading vote getter, if I recall correctly, was the leading vote getter in the initial election, and then it went to a runoff, and Ted Cruz overtook him.
Yeah.
which is not a common thing. That's actually a pretty big upset.
Yeah, I mean, it was all ground level Tea Party activists who were making.
Cruz assembled quite a coalition of voters to win that primary election over much more established David Dewhurst, who'd been the lieutenant governor of Texas for many years. Dewhurst hit Cruz on being a lawyer, which, I mean, we all hate lawyers, right? Nobody likes lawyers, but he had ads talking about how Cruz had represented a Chinese rubber company, a Chinese tire company, in a court case against, I guess, an American plaintiff or an American defendant. I don't recall who was on which side, which is basically saying, Ted Cruz, how dare you be a lawyer? It's his job. The Chinese company hires him. He's a lawyer. Is the lawyer? Oh, I only take cases if my client is innocent. That's not how being a lawyer works in real life.
Yeah.
And so Ted Cruz had this really memorable ad responding to that allegation, responding to the variety of Dewhurst's allegation. They play them political mudslinging, and it was these various people. Again, you had your sort of multi-age, multi-ethnic. You couldn't really tell their occupations because they're just sitting in front of a white background. They would finish each other's sentences. They'd say a few words, and then it would cut to someone else saying more words of complete sentences, which is a thing in a lot of ads, actually, which I always think is interesting. But there was one part where the sentence was, David Dewhurst thinks I care more about Chinese tires than his tax and spend record. And it starts off with a woman saying, David Dewhurst thinks I care more about. It cuts to another woman who says Chinese tires, and then a man, if I recall, who says then his tax and spend record. It might have been a woman in the third one. But what I remember about it is the woman who says Chinese tires is an older white woman with a bit of a drawl, and she goes, Chinese tires! So it's just, David Dewhurst thinks I care more about Chinese tires than his tax and spend record. And so I can't think of political ads now without thinking about some woman screaming Chinese tires. It's a great ad because I remember it.
Yeah. And none of Bloomberg's are.
I remember there's so many of them. He's bought so many of them in Houston, and you don't see a lot of political advertising for the Democrat primary right now in Texas.
Yeah.
You're seeing it, I'm sure, in Iowa. I'm sure they're sick of it. In New Hampshire, I'm sure they're sick of it. Even probably South Carolina, Nevada, to some extent, they're probably sick of it. And so here, all we're seeing is Bloomberg ads, unless you watch like an Iowa college in a.
You mean all we're seeing is Trump ads?
Well, basically, I mean, I'll give Bloomberg credit. The entire ad wasn't about Trump, but just he's mentioned in it. But that might have made it more interesting. But unless you're watching a sporting event with a college from Iowa in it, you'll see ads for the other. They're buying national ad time on ESPN for people watching Iowa Hawkeyes basketball. But other than that, it stands out because if you watch every news broadcast, there's a Bloomberg ad. Next break, there's a Bloomberg ad. He's.
And you have him memorized.
He's almost as commonly seen as Mattress Mac on these ads, which is not what I would have expected.
For people living outside of Houston, I'm sorry that you don't have the joy of watching Mattress Mac, because he is wonderful.
Yes. Think about wherever you are, you have some local ad of note.
Yeah.
It might not be on the level of Mattress Mac, probably not, but you have something where you think, oh yeah, if I watch the news, they're always on. That's what Michael Bloomberg is apparently trying to do.
All right. We're going to move on to our main meat segment for the day. And I figured to start off the show, what do we want to talk about the most? And the thing that's nearest and dearest to my heart, and what I'm hoping this show will implicitly be from here on out, which is an analysis of worldview from a biblical perspective. So I want to talk a little bit about what it is to have a biblical worldview. As you hopefully know, if you've watched our About Us video, check out reasonedrefrain.com/about, and you can see us talking about ourselves. We're both Christians. We're committed committed conservative Christians. We're both, I think we're both Republicans, although I have much more libertarian leanings than actual Republicans, even though I'm in the party registered.
Great thing in Texas is that you don't have to register to vote in the primary. So I can say, as somebody who's not registered with the party but has voted in the primary,
Okay.
I can get it from that angle.
I'm getting pretty close to getting rid of my registration in the Republican Party. So we're make no bones about the fact that we're conservative Christians, and that guides how we look at the world, what we believe, what we think, and that's good. What the Bible says should determine what you think because it's true. That's something that we're going to be coming back to a lot. We're hopefully going to be helping Christians understand how the Bible applies to their real life, how they should think about the world, and hopefully have some laughs along the way. That's the plan. So, a few main things that I want to kind of lay out about worldviews, what it is, what it isn't, and the basics of a biblical worldview and what the Bible is for the Christian. So, what a worldview is. Pretty simple. If you haven't ever heard the term before, you can probably guess based on the two words that it's made up of. It's the way that you view the world. Worldviews come about uncritically. They come about usually just by culture, by the context that you're in, the way that you're raised, the family that you have, the people you interact with. These things form how you view the world. It's just simple fact that a young Chinese woman living in America who immigrated when she was 6 is going to view the world a little bit differently than an older white guy who's lived in Iowa his whole life. Context is gonna have a big impact on how you view the world, and it comes about often uncritically. And Christians should be viewing the world critically. They should be shaping their worldview according to the biblical text, in my opinion. The way that you view things like God, truth, reality, knowledge, ethics, good and evil, humanity as a whole, these are all things that everybody has an opinion on. Even if your opinion is, I don't really think that exists or that matters. That's still an opinion. Everybody thinks that people are a way. Now, Christians believe that people are created good, but intrinsically evil because of this thing called the fall. We'll get into a little bit more of that when we talk about the Bible at the end, but everybody views all of these things a certain way. Even the atheist views God a certain way. He views him as non-existent, and he hates him for it. So, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But the one that I wanted to focus in on, the component of a worldview that matters the most, I think, is the view of truth. What do you think about truth? And this will be the subject of another show probably in the future, but truth is objective reality. A statement of truth is a statement that supposedly reflects reality. Would you agree with this as a basic working definition of truth?
Yes, I would. Yeah.
Okay. The things that kind of expand on that, the way that our culture tends to treat truth nowadays as a result of postmodernism and what you might call relativism, is the idea that truth doesn't really exist on an objective basis. It can't exist outside of the person. You hear this in the phrase, my truth. My truth is my truth, your truth is your truth. And so you can believe something and you can believe that that's true, and it doesn't really matter if I believe that that's true. So 2 + 2 might be 5 for you, but 2 + 2 is not 5 for me. It's 3 for me, okay? And everybody else who thinks that it's 4, they have their truth. This is utter, complete nonsense and garbage. No other way to put it. It is just stupid.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's important to distinguish where we understand the source of truth. Because I think I'm glad we're talking about worldview. I think it's an area in which Christians, non-Christians, people of any religion, people who don't have any religious convictions at all, people who are agnostic, atheist. It's a concept that I don't think a lot of people, Christian or otherwise, think about probably enough.
Yeah.
It almost comes, your worldview comes naturally. It's something everybody has. But I do think it's an area where we all do share a common ground, that we all have a worldview. We all arrived at a worldview through some means. And for the most part, I believe we all understand to some extent how we arrived at that worldview, whether we're right or wrong, or whether we fully understand it. We have opinions, and we can generally give reasons for them.
Yeah.
That we feel.
Well.
I mean, good reasons I didn't say, just reasons.
Reasons.
So
okay, yeah.
So
it's an
I'm
important
glad we're
distinction.
talking about this, and it's something that when I talk to people, whether they're believers or not, I'm looking to understand a worldview before I start talking about anything else.
Yeah.
Because that's going to shape how everything. One, it should tell you where everything I say comes from, and two, it will tell me how they're likely to interpret.
Yeah.
What I'm going to talk about.
Yeah, it helps you filter through what you need to be saying and how.
Yes.
Particularly when your goal is ultimately the proclamation of the gospel.
Right.
Which wraps around to truth as an essential component of understanding what a worldview is can't escape it. The idea of relative truth, nonsense. To say that all truth is relative is to make an objective statement, and so your argument falls down from the get-go.
Yes. Only a Sith deals in absolutes. Right.
Exactly. Right. Now, are absolutely all Siths deal in absolutes?
Yeah, said the Jedi.
The thing that often gets kind of brushed under the rug or so is this idea of objective truth in how now the example of 2 + 2 = 5, everybody sees that's ridiculous on its face. Of course 2 + 2 doesn't equal 5, it equals 4. Are you crazy? We're not talking about that when we're talking about my truth. We're talking about what it always falls into one of two categories. It's either we're talking about opinions like chocolate ice cream is better than vanilla ice cream. That's an objective. That's a statement of my truth. Yeah. Okay. No.
I mean, yeah. Was I supposed to disagree with that?
That's Of course, that's true, right?
Because I like vanilla ice cream, but then I like to sprinkle Ovaltine on it, so it's kind of chocolatey.
Kind of chocolate-esque ice cream. Okay. Well, you're a heretic, so we're gonna have to deal with this.
Okay.
So
Nesquik or Hershey's, and it becomes your
okay. Yes, Hershey's is fine.
Okay.
You're back in the fold.
Okay.
This is the problem. Confusing opinion or preference with truth. And it starts with language. It starts with how you talk about these things. Truth is objective reality. There is no my truth. There is no your truth. There is the truth. Now, there are also opinions and preferences. And so that's where discussion gets fun, when difference of opinion and difference of preference comes into play. But those opinions and preferences have to agree on the ground of truth. And so what is the truth of Christianity? What is the truth of the Bible? That's the next thing we're going to talk about. And this is something that for me, funny statement right there, right? For me, in my experience, my truth is that the Bible didn't make sense to me for a long time because I had this view of segmented stories in the Bible. I knew about Jonah. I knew about Moses. I knew about when Daniel got on the ark, and I knew about Daniel didn't get on the ark, just FYI. I knew about Daniel. I knew about all these different people and what they did, but I didn't have the through line. I didn't have the reality firm in my head that this is a book of history and it's telling one continuous story. And so something I harp on all the time with people that I teach the Bible to is that the Bible is one continuous story. And there's a resource on my personal website, mygiveonthings.com. You should go look at mygiveonthings.com/timeline. I'll link it in the description. But
I agree with that, by the way.
Yeah.
That's truth. You should do it.
You should. You should also like and subscribe if you haven't already. So like and subscribe, YouTube, Facebook, all of the usual plugs, reasonedrefrain.com. Thank you. You're welcome. My biblical timeline lays out the story of the Bible in sort of a graphic format. And from the beginning, you have to understand that the Bible is a story. Now, what is a story? A story is, a story is a story, right? It's got characters, it's got setting, it's got conflict, it's got rising action, climax, resolution, and then a resolve at the end, a denouement. The characters of the biblical story are established in the first few sentences. In the beginning was the Word. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Okay, we've got one character already, God. We've got the setting, heavens and the earth. We read chapter 1 and we get to God's greatest creation. He's creating things, calls him good. And he gets to man and he calls him very good. We've got some more characters. And then chapter 3 comes along and we have now the serpent, a third group of characters, was more crafty than any of the other beasts of the field. And chapter 3 is where the conflict enters the picture. We know the story. Adam and Eve go through what's called the fall. They break the one rule that God gave them, and this sets up the conflict for the rest of the story. Man is fallen. Man is sinful. Man is going to die. What are we going to do about it? That's what this story is about. The story of the Bible is all about man and the fact that he is sinful and cannot save himself. And so it's a very long, complicated story. There's lots and lots of layers. People will spend years and years writing books and books about this one story that starts in Genesis and ends in Revelation. And through the telling of this story, you see a man come along who fixes this problem, Jesus. He fixes the problem of death by taking on our sins, the thing that makes us die, and giving us his righteousness, resurrecting us to a new earth. This is the biblical story in a nutshell. And so when you try to study the Bible, you have to keep that context in mind. I'm joking all the time with my kids. I call them my kids. I teach them in high school and college age students.
It's good that you clarified that.
Yeah.
Because we've been over the fact that you're not married. And whatnot.
I'm not married and I have no kids.
Right.
Physically. The thing that I'm constantly harping on with my kids is context. Where does context begin in the biblical story? In any passage that you're looking at, if you jump down into Ephesians or if you jump down into Romans, where does the context begin? And for a long time, I would push them to recognize that the context began at chapter 1 of that book. So I'd say we're in Ephesians 3. So what's the relevant context? Well, it starts in Ephesians 1. And once I got them trained on that, then I threw them for a curve. I drop them down into Romans 10 and say, okay, what's the context for Romans 10? Where does it begin? They'd say Romans 1, and I'd say, nope. It begins in Genesis 1. This is one continuous story. So just like we're not going to plop down into chapter 15 of Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix and expect to understand what's going on, we're not going to plop down into Matthew chapter 10 and expect to understand what's going on. If we just sit down and read it, we're going to be a little bit confused. You have to know what's going on in the context of the whole story. And so many times, I kind of have a reputation at church as being that guy who's really picky and always has something wrong to say, and I try to fight against that reputation a little bit, but it's true in that people, yeah, a little bit.
A little bit.
It's an accurate one because I'm concerned about what does the Bible actually say. And I think quite often, particularly in narrative literature, when we're reading the Gospels or books in the Old Testament that are telling stories, we get it wrong because we're looking for some sort of an application directly to our lives, instead of recognizing that this is a story talking about the sinfulness of man and that Savior, Jesus.
Which is not to say we can't find applications. It's just that's not the first thing that we need to be looking for when we look at the scriptures.
Correct. And I would even say oftentimes the application is as simple as look to the end of the story.
Right. For example, I find a lot of application in Judges as the story of basically you can apply the entire nation of Israel almost to one individual. Sin, cry out for redemption, need deliverance, God delivers him, everyone's happy, they're all happy, and then they sin again.
Correct.
It's just this great, and by the end of it, there's so much sin, they're not even asking God for help. There's a great application in that.
Yes.
But above all that, we're talking about the history of the Israelites, and that's what the context is, and that whole that whole situation in sin is directly flows into the story of where we bring Christ into it later.
Exactly.
So so don't think we're saying don't have application, but don't sit here and say this is meant for me.
The application of Judges 19 is not, okay, cut up your prostitute and mail them all throughout Israel.
Right. So if you throw the Bible open and it lands on Judges 3:31, you're like, I gotta go, I gotta get an ox goad and I gotta go kill some Philistines.
Yeah.
No, this is about Shamgar doing that, and he too saved Israel.
Here we go. Excellent. Final fact about the Bible. So, for you listeners or viewers who aren't a Christian, I would welcome you. I'd want you watching our stuff. I hope that you find something entertaining or useful out of all of this. A final thing to put these two things together. Bible's a story. Truth is the central component of a worldview. For the Christian, you have to recognize the Bible is a true story. It is a historical story. It has been repeatedly demonstrated to line up with archaeological fact. It is defensible, eminently defensible, by every historical measure that we have when compared with all other stories from the same time period. So, since this is our first episode, I'm a master's of theology, is the highest level of training I've received. So I'm no slouch when it comes to thinking. And Ty here is one of the smartest people I know. And so you've got the formal training from the theology side and the really smart guy who believes this stuff. So you're going to hear both of these perspectives. And I hope that if you're not a Christian, don't tune us out calling us simpletons. Now, some of this might have sounded just crazy. The idea of believing that Genesis 3 is talking about an actual historical fact of two people who talked to a snake and sinned. That sounds a little bit crazy, but bear with me to the end of the story, put it that way. Because when you read this story and you understand it, a remarkable thing happens. And for me, my conversion experience was very illogical. It was very analytical, or at least my internalization of my faith experience was very logical and analytical. It was, this stuff lines up with reality. It expresses things as they actually are. This is true. And so if it's true, then it has certain implications for myself. You realize that you're in the story, and where you are in the story is between the end of Jude and the beginning of Revelation, or I guess Revelation chapter 4, and you have a responsibility and a job. You have to think of something about this. You have to make up your mind. And so that was my conversion experience. And so I would hope that I'll be able to at least dialogue with some of you people who don't think that there's any sort of a intelligent reason to become a Christian. I would say both of us would emphatically disagree with that and would be happy to discuss.
Sure, absolutely.
So that is the end of the meat segment. Anything you want to add? What are your thoughts on how I'm presenting the Bible here?
No, I would agree with that. I think in general, to understand the Scriptures as a source of truth, certainly the way we interpret the truth in that, that's been a source of debate within Christianity for centuries. And I think we do need to acknowledge that there's a lot of Christians who agree or disagree on how that should be interpreted. That's not
on how, like, you're talking like Genesis 3.
Genesis 3. So,
Okay.
For example, if Genesis 3 is a direct reference to two specific people and a specific snake, or whether it's an allegory, I think on that question, does it being one or the other dramatically change the point? The point of that there is sin in the world, that sin entered the world. I mean, that's something probably above most, if not all things, is it is irrefutable truth. That there's sin, that there's evil that's entered the world, and again, whether that's specifically through a literal interpretation of the sections or whether it's an allegorical take on it, it's a bit like this time of year. It's Christmas time, and you get people who are not Christians or people who are fatigued by Christmas, the Christmas time, or don't particularly care for it, which that's a really strange thing for me because I love Christmas. I love Christmas from the Christian perspective. I love it from the secular perspective. I love Hanukkah. I'm not Jewish. I love the whole holiday celebration thing this time of year. It's so much fun. But people who don't like it, they'll say, well, but Jesus was actually born in the summer. It's like that doesn't change the reason to celebrate his birth, whether we're co-opting some sort of pagan holiday, as is often noted, or whether we're doing it at the right time of year. We're celebrating the gift that God has given us of salvation through Jesus Christ, through his coming to earth.
Okay, so your basic point, and relating that to the question of allegorical interpretation of certain passages, I understand your point, and I agree with the way you expressed it there at the end. That it doesn't change the central truth.
Right.
Now, I will go to the mat with anybody. I think that it's quite important to take Adam as a literal man because of the theology that gets later developed by Paul. However, I would agree that you can take those passages allegorically and be saved and be a Christian. I'm going to fight you. We're going to talk. We're going to keep hashing it out, and we're going to disagree, and we're going to disagree vehemently. But we're going to disagree vehemently as brothers. So that's would be my caveat. Right. I was like, I think the better Christian is the one who takes it literally. But if I can get you in the door as with an allegorical interpretation, then I'll convince you later that Adam was a real guy.
And I'm not bringing that up to say.
I know you.
That's a source of internal debate for me on how to interpret it, because it's something that's not. It's not inconceivable to look at it both ways for me. Certainly, if you believe in the omnipotent, omnipresent, all-encompassing power of God, he can do whatever the heck he wants.
Amen. Spoken like a Calvinist.
Yes.
It's funny you said something and now I've lost it. What were you just? Repeat what you just said.
Okay, about believing, whether you believe that it's an allegory or whether you believe it's a literal story.
Yeah,
anything in the scriptures, no matter how far fetched, even if it's something that can be presented and understandably in an allegorical sense or in a not entirely literal sense,
and still
you can take it literally because God is all powerful and can make literally anything happen. So if the Bible talked about a dancing taco with the face of Josephus, you can take that literally, or it can be some sort of allegory. But God can make a dancing taco with the face of Josephus if he wants to. That is not at all out of the realm of possibility.
I got it. The thing that made me think of was I really can't stand it when Christians will dismiss other religions on grounds that they cannot apply to their own religion. So, for example, people talk about how ridiculous it is, the idea that Muhammad was visited by an angel in a cave and that a spider weaved a spider web over the mouth of the cave that saved Muhammad's life. These are things common in Muslim lore.
Right, which, I mean, you have many Christians who again, they dismiss that, but they take the unmistakable truth of Charlotte's Web.
Yeah, or they'll be shocked that you would wonder about Balaam's donkey speaking. Like, okay, God miraculously made a donkey. Picture a donkey in your head. If it spoke in human words, of course the atheist is going to think that that's just as weird, if not weirder. And so Christians who dismiss other worldviews and religions on bases that they cannot apply to their own religion consistently bugs me to no end.
Yes.
So you will never hear me dismiss Muslims or Islam because of X, Y, or Z miracle or X, Y, or Z crazy thing. Because there's some crazy stuff in Christianity that I believe wholeheartedly. The differentiating factor has to do with the biblical story and the gospel itself. The fact that I've been saved by grace through faith, that I will be resurrected to a new earth. These are also crazy things that I believe. But I want to be consistent, and you should be too. You should not be flippant or disregard a religion that billions of people on the earth believe, whether it's Muslim, Islam, Hinduism, Mormonism, Taoism. Pick your religion. Atheism. Yeah. I do think atheism is a religion. We can talk more about that later, but pick your religion. You shouldn't be dismissive. It's definitely a worldview.
Atheists would agree with that, so we can put that. But yes, so we can.
So yeah, consistency. Whatever standard you apply to others, you should apply to yourself. The basic fact of hypocrisy is detestable. It is wrong, and Christians should not be hypocrites. Now they are, I myself included. All Christians are hypocrites because we all want to be better than we are. We all claim that what we do is wrong, and yet we do it.
Right. Which is why in Christian hypocrisy, it's great for TV ratings.
Yeah.
sells so many newspapers or whatever your newspaper equivalent is now. Get your clicks. People love. Yeah. Audiences love Christian hypocrisy, and it's so understandable. But if you also accept the truth of the Bible, Christian hypocrisy is understandable from that. It's not justified.
Yeah.
But to sit here as a Christian and be shocked that there's hypocrisy among Christians, no, it's not shocking. It's sad and frustrating and irritating. And it's good that it's called out because people need to correct that. But that it's shocking. Most of the shock over Christian hypocrisy is in mocking.
Yeah. Can you believe that they say that this is wrong and yet they do it?
Right.
The headline could just as easily be, "Hey, sinner sins." Yeah.
Right. But and again, on a point about sin, sinning, but not saying that it's wrong while doing it,
right,
is still sinning. Mm-hmm. So it's not inherently worse than sinning. Well, it looks worse to the human eye, to the human mind, of course, and it's not. That's hypocrisy is not a positive, but hypocrisy is a sin, as so many things are a sin.
Yep. Well,
we're not going to do a top 10 list of sins. We're not going to do a Letterman bit on that because it's not how sin works.
Yeah, amen. That would be a good topic for a future show.
Seven deadly sins, not in any particular order, right? Is that the subheading?
Yeah,
it should be.
Where do the 7 deadly sins even come from? Anyone? It's the Catholics. Okay. It's the Catholics. There's no list of 7 deadly sins in the Bible. It's Pope. What was it? Pope Pius?
One of the innocent ones? Because that's, hypocrisy right in the name.
There you go. All right. We're not Catholic, by the way. We'll talk about Catholics eventually on this show, too. So stick around.
Going over the Pope's names that's as somebody who's a Baptist and grew up exclusive of Protestant, if not Baptist, that it's always fascinating me, the popes and the different names they have. That's actually something I've read about, just the history of their existence, less so than the theological aspect of it, because I liked history. But yes,
as my dad's fond of saying that there's an old Catholic prophecy that according to him, this is true. There's an old Catholic prophecy that says that the current pope is going to be the last one. That there was a prophecy that said this is how many popes there are left, and so my dad's constantly talking about, we're expecting the end of the world any minute. So anyway, we're gonna go ahead and wrap things up. One more time, reasonedrefrain.com. Like, subscribe, find us on YouTube, Facebook. Everything is Reasoned Refrain. So we hope to see you guys more. Let us know, comments and emails, what you want us to be talking about, what you want to hear from us on. And hopefully this will turn into a little bit of fun that we have for years to come.
I certainly hope so. So let us know what if you have things you hope we can come up with some sort of terrible pun about. We will do
Amen.
Our best.
We want more bad puns than ever before. All right. We'll see you guys next time. Thanks.